I think I'm more like a lot of Razorback fans where, I think last night when we did our stream, I said 35% was my chance of Adu Theoro coming back, which I still never felt strong about. And now with all of this going on, I'm like, oh yeah, he's 100% it's not even a question. He's moving on. He's going. I would love to be wrong, but he's staying. Because I would assume that if he's looking around with his representations and everybody, and he's seeing these players that are deciding to go back to college, especially being in those types of positions he's in, it's like, oh yeah, I'm moving up by default. I don't have to do anything. I'm moving up the ranks. I don't have to move here. Somebody's going to take a chance on me where I may have been lower, but now I may end up going to this team at this particular pick. So I feel even more so that he's going to be sticking with it and everything. But if he does come back, if he shocks the world or at least shocks me and comes back, then I don't think I ever would have seen a world where that many people would say no to the NBA draft to come back to college basketball. I know NIL is a big part of it, of course, but even then, even with the NIL, I just never dreamed that I would see a good amount of players who are first round picks saying, nah, I'm going to go back to college. I'm going to go back to Michigan. I'm going to go back to Gainesville and hang out for another year, play ball, and maybe next year I'll get drafted a couple spots ahead of where I'm at now. I just never dreamed that in a million years we'd see that day.
It's wild, man. And, the other thing about guys like Yaxel and Condon, they're going back to situations where they have a lot of competition at their position. Isn't that crazy? Can you guys believe that? Did you know Florida is going to have 4 forwards on their roster and in their rotation? Like it's literally unprecedented, unheard of. I can't believe it. Michigan, that they have Morez Johnson and Ade Mara there in the front court, and Yaxel's just going to go join that. It's the craziest thing ever. But the point being, these guys are choosing to go back to that. Like if you're coming back to school, it's for 2 reasons. One would be money, like NIL and whatever. But if you're a projected first round pick, you're going to get good money, and it's going to be a guaranteed contract. It's going to be multi-year. So there's a lot of reasons to consider staying, even if it's a little bit less. But there's that, and then there's the potential of, can I up my stock? How much of those guys going to go up their stock? You know what I mean? Like, is Yaxel going to play his way from a first-round pick to a first-round pick by going and playing with better players where he might not have the exact same role that he did where he was starring somewhere else? So it's interesting to see, and it makes me wonder, like, what those conversations are like with their inner circles, with their agents, with all those people that are involved in the decision-making process, and what the differences are between what's being said to Adu right now. Because in a way, you could have a very similar situation with him, and you could talk about how much could Adu up his stock, but you could have the same exact conversations with these other guys here. And the other thing is, Adu has been dealing with that knee injury to where he hasn't been able to showcase himself as much as these other teams as maybe he would a year from now. Of course, you run the risk of another injury, but it's a fascinating deal, and I think it goes a lot deeper than maybe people realize. So many factors at play.
It's fascinating when you think about it from the player's perspective. You think about it from Yaxel's perspective or Adu Thero's perspective, and that's ultimately what matters, is how Adu Theoro views the situation. We can have our opinion, we can think what we think, and we can view him how we want, but it depends on how he views it, what he values in this process. But it is fascinating. And Curtis, to your point from the Arkansas standpoint, it's crazy that, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, man, why are y'all talking about this? He's probably not coming back. I mean, he's most likely going to go to the draft. Why are y'all talking about this? Because you kind of have to in this day and age, especially like we said, with some of these guys that have made these similar announcements, guys in similar positions. In college basketball today, there's something to be said about building your roster and having a certain amount of threes, having a certain amount of fours, having a certain amount of twos, and whatever, making sure it all fits. But there's also something to be said about getting as many really good basketball players as you can and stockpiling. I mean, it's an arms race, man. Everyone's, there's so many different ways you can accumulate talent. And John Calipari, what has he made his living doing? Sitting there being strategic and only taking a certain amount of guys? No, he gets as much talent as he possibly can, and they figure it out. And I think that's the situation Arkansas needs to be viewing this through. Of course, it's still, you shouldn't be operating like, all right, we got to do Theoro in the bag. Now let's move on from there. Obviously, but I think it's worthwhile if you have a domino this big. And from the jump, Curtis, you've said how they've been preparing that package. They don't want to close that door. And John Calipari is not going to close that door unless you close it for them. And Adu Theoro might. But it's definitely something that you need to entertain, especially with these surrounding circumstances. And so it's a fascinating situation. And I think we can have that conversation of how does it fit? What does this mean for other places? Blah, blah, blah. Trevin Brazil, is he going to be mad? You figure it out. You bring in as much talent as you can. And I said Karter Knox yesterday was about as good of an asset as you could get. A Duke Hero would be pretty damn close to that.
Yeah. No, he would be awesome. And I'm going to be honest about it too, guys. I'm selfish. I prefer college basketball over the NBA. I think almost all Razorback fans do. It's not to say they don't like the NBA, but college basketball is just so much more fun and it's a lot entertaining. That's what we talk about. And that to me, and this is what's going on where I'm not saying it's perfect because you have portal problems and everything, but this is kind of giving a vibe of what it used to be like in college basketball back in the 80s and 90s and everything, where you got to know players in college basketball because they stayed in college basketball. You think about like Shaq, he was there for 3 years at LSU. Michael Jordan was there for 3 years at North Carolina. The greatest players were in college multiple years. And then you started having guys go straight out of high school, but then they changed the rules. Like, okay, well, 1 year. Well, then it's just one and done. There's a reason why it's called one and done, was based on that. You had one player, you moved on, you never really heard from again in college basketball. You're like, oh yeah, that guy played. Who did he play for? I don't even remember who he played for in college. And now it's kind of getting back to the point where some of, not all of them, like Cooper Flagg's not coming back to college, but so many great players are choosing to stay in college. Maybe not always with the same team, but in college. And I love that because it makes it so much more fun and entertaining. Obviously, from the Arkansas perspective, selfishly, you want the best players, but getting to see those great players at Florida again next year is great for college basketball. Getting to see, a guy like Yaxel being at a different school, but up at Michigan and everything, it's great because people know the name and they get to see him play again and see him in a different role. I think, college basketball has always been great, but man, this is something that's really going to be great for the sport overall. If it can continue this way of having some of your best players that could go first round, could be way up there in the NBA draft, deciding, no, I'd rather be in college. I'd rather play college basketball for tournament sake, for preseason sake, all that stuff. It's great for college basketball. So I'm a fan of this, and I love it.
Oh, man. Yeah, I love it too, for sure. This is awesome. The more good players you can have in the sport, the better. I'm partial to college basketball over the NBA for very obvious reasons. So this has been great for me to watch. It's just so bizarre. I mean, it was only a couple years ago, guys, that if you were even on the border of just getting drafted, period, like there was no conversation to be had. Like if you show up in a mock draft at like 51, it's like, oh, well, okay, he's gone, he's in. It's just, it blows me away. Like, I get it to a degree, like with Thero's situation. Like I get it to a degree. With Milo Suzanne, I get it to a degree. But man, with Yaxel, he's a first round. He is a first round pick. He could go top 20, and he's going to play at Michigan. It is unheard of, man. And I cannot wrap my head around it. I'm with you. I love it. I think it's awesome. But it's insane. And then you wonder is it going to correct itself if they do the revenue sharing and all that? Will that kind of, drop down that, NIL money a little bit to where it bounces out, or like, will the NBA have to react to this and be like, Jesus, like we got to get the good players into our league. And then they start upping the bags or what? Like, I don't know, man. It's just, it's a wild, wild time and it's evolved so quickly.
One thing I think we've
we were off to such a good start.
Learned about basketball players is being buttered up. Am I good? Are y'all hear me?
We got you.
Okay. I was just saying, basketball players like being buttered up a lot. They like being recruited. They like being sought after. They are filled with egos. They love being told how great they are. And I think there's something to be said about that when you think about some of these decisions. You have a college that's offering you $3 million. You have this college coach that's telling you how great you are, that's telling you how awesome you are. The NBA doesn't care if you live or die. They're going to have another prospect. They're going to always, and they know they can get you next year for maybe even cheaper, and you're even older and have less leverage. The NBA is probably not telling these guys a ton of things that they want to hear because the NBA is not in that business. They don't have any reason to lie to you. You know what I mean? I think there's something to be said about that when you think about some of these guys with a lot of egos that have a chance to make a lot of money and be stars and be marketable. And think about college sports. I mean, not to bring up Caitlin Clark and have that whole thing, but like, how marketable you can be being a Final Four high-level college basketball player. Obviously, you can be very marketable if you're an NBA star as well, but what's gonna be best for your marketability as an individual? Being the 11th man on an NBA roster or winning a title in college? Probably winning a title in college. And so I think that's the decision that some of these guys are probably making. And so, again, it doesn't mean, hey, these guys did it, so a Duke Thero is going to do it. But there's a lot of factors to these conversations that are just different than they were maybe a few years ago.
And tell me if this makes sense real quick, as I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this without screwing it up. But has the conversation now shifted a little bit from it's not come back to school and can he up his stock? It's almost to the point of come back to school and can you maintain your stock? Like, can you come back and get this huge bag, like this 1-year contract, and then hit free agency and have the exact same market? Like, is that still going to be there for you? Like, it almost kind of changes the narrative a little bit, because in the past, it wouldn't make sense to come back and it's like, okay, his dude can bump from, back into the first round to lottery or second round to a first round lock or whatever. And now it's like, okay, if you're late first, early second, you can go back to school, make $3 million for 1 year, and then go back next season into the draft and be late first, early second, and then just start it then. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think that is exactly how it is, because it's always about the perception and viewpoints, and almost like recruiting pitches. Because if you're a coach like Cal, and I'm not saying he does this, maybe he's not the best example, but any coach that is looking to try to get a championship and have their players come in and be great, you want to keep them in there as long as possible and keep coaching them. Before, when it was going to the NBA, it's like, man, there's nothing I can tell you that is going to change your mind, because I can't pay you millions of dollars. I can't bring your brand up, because the NBA is the biggest of the branding and everything. I can't compete with that. So there's no point in me even trying. But now it's like, I have recruiting pitches where I can pay you. And I almost feel like, not to use a baseball example, because it may not make sense, but it almost feels like, you hear the thing of kids that want to stay at college baseball and everything's like, oh, would you rather, play in front of 15,000 fans, in front of everybody, and, everyone's cheering you on, and you get to ride on jets to go to places instead of on crappy buses? Wouldn't you rather do that in college than do that in the minor leagues? It kind of feels the same way of what it's getting to with the NBA. Not to say if you're in the NBA, it's not as good, but in college, you're, instead of going to the G League or the D League or overseas or whatever, it's like, yeah, you can go over there and do that. But here you're going to play in front of every crowd. You're going to be on TV all the time. Your marketability, as you said, Curtis, is your branding. It's going to be there, and you're going to maintain that, and you're just going to build that wealth. And we're going to be able to compete with the pay that you would get by going to the NBA right now. Why wouldn't you want to do that? So, yeah, I think that it has shifted so much to where the recruiting pitching is no longer, hey, go to the NBA and get yours and, build your career. It's like, hey, they'll still be there. But you come back here, we'll give you something that you'll enjoy even more, and that you can still have and put on your resume, if you will, by giving us just one more year. Here's all the things you get. I think it's crazy how much it's changed.
It's absolutely nuts, man.
Yeah.
I just can't believe we're talking about all this stuff.
I know, it's fun,
but it's very, very true, man, because there's always that argument about starting your clock. Like, the quicker you can get to your second contract, the better. Like, we know all the things that have been said in the past, but John, you make a really good point there and if I'm some of these guys right now, in that, if I'm not a lottery pick or whatever, you really got to look at that and be like, all right, living the life, 20,000 people in Bud Walton Arena watching me, everything's chartered. I'm making more money, and I can do this for another year and just be the freaking man. Or, yeah, like, I'm taking the buses back and forth to, Cedar Rapids or like wherever, 10 days here, 10 days there, up and down. I'm not playing when I'm on the NBA roster. And then I'm, just living in Motel 6s when I'm, out in the G League. It's something to consider, man. It really is.
I also don't think people realize the difference between a standard G League contract, a two-way contract, and a fully guaranteed NBA contract. Those are three very different things. Mm-hmm. If you're making just G League money, you're literally making like 70 grand. Like, you're making like nothing. That's why a lot of guys just don't do it. Guys that are good enough to play in the G League go play overseas, because you make more money overseas. there's also a very big difference between a two-way contract and a fully guaranteed you're on the roster league minimum of like 2.8 million or whatever. If you're on a two-way contract, like you say, it's a different life. It's a very different guarantee, and it's hard to
$600K, I think. But yeah,
it's it's obviously like nothing to scoff at, but it's like, but again, if you're on a two-way contract in the NBA, you are 1,000% going to make more money in college basketball, maybe even double or triple in a Dude Thero's case. Like he would make way more money. And I'm not saying he's guaranteed going to be on a two-way contract, but if he's having teams that are telling him, hey, we don't know if, we don't know if you're going to be able to get a fully guaranteed deal. It's definitely something he's got to consider. Now, ultimately, again, these guys want to play in the NBA. All that's true. But like, I think people are overlooking the financial aspect of this a little bit.
Yeah. And also, I know we'll get into the chat and everything, but I think it's a great discussion about how if you're a player that has had so much success in college basketball and everything, and I think you brought it up, Andrew, the Caitlin Clark example, which I know is women's basketball, and it's a little bit different of an animal, but still, there's so many examples of that marketability and everything. I think maybe Michael Jordan said this. Somebody said it where, yeah, I made a lot of money in professional sports, but I made my most money with my branding. Like with the brand that I have, my contracts I was signing with shoot. I mean, we got guys signing shoe deals for crying out loud in college basketball. So, we'll never, maybe not ever know the exact amount of how much somebody's making or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I try to look at it through my viewpoint, which I know I'm not a big time college athlete, but I try to look at it my viewpoint of like, would I rather just do all the things and go through the grind and all of that and getting to the NBA, which eventually I can, or can I come back another year? In every single arena I'm going to go to, I got 20,000 screaming fans for me. I got me on TV all the time. They're putting my highlights on SportsCenter. They got people, and if I'm playing at Florida, they got people at Inside Arkansas talking about me because I'm at this school and this game last night. I just think it's a no-brainer, man. I think that at the end of the day, you want to make your most money, but you also want to be recognized for your greatness. And I think college basketball right now has, whether you hate it, love it, like it, whatever, they've done a great job of, with the NIL and other things, giving you that opportunity to showcase your greatness, your brand better than anybody. And there's no cap on it. You can make it happen.
I mean, it wasn't a Dude Thero who said, I want to be more famous than Ronnie Brewer in Arkansas. You ain't going to do that off a 116 appearance, buddy.
You're absolutely right. And think about it from this standpoint. And all we're doing is getting people worked up for no reason. Yeah, but honestly, and I know this is a very, very small factor into it, but you just got to think about like prisoner of the moment kind of stuff here. And, Thero, he goes to the draft and he gets taken with the 6th pick in the 2nd round or whatever. Man, we'll celebrate it, and, we'll go live and talk about it. And, the University of Arkansas account will put stuff out about it. And, there will be stories written or whatever. But it does, and it's it's a life-changing moment. Like, I'm not trying to downplay it at all, but there is something to be said for the reaction that's been had for something like Yaxel going back to school, and like even Karter coming back. We talk about what he wants to be at Arkansas, the reaction to Karter coming back, and all the love that's been thrown out there, and the, oh wow, this is nuts, whatever. And there's got to be a part of you, it's like, man, that would feel good. Mm-hmm. It would feel good to get that kind of love and be the man like that. And, so it's something that people think about. It's in their mind. It's not the biggest part of the decision-making process. And you got people who can take the emotion out of it, that can advise you, appropriately and everything. But there's certainly reasons for him to be considering or actually making a decision. Now, that decision, maybe it's already been made and we just don't even know. But hypothetically speaking, I think that there's, and we're guilty of it too. It's just been the prevailing belief on our part of like, oh yeah, he's out of here. Yeah, it's whatever. And we just, have kind of moved on from it in a lot of ways. But as you can see today, and then if you just really think about it and where the landscape is right now, there are plenty of reasons for a guy like a Dude Thero to be sitting there considering coming back to college.
I said the percentage was 3% yesterday. I would like to amend it. Y'all ready for this?
Yeah.
12%.
Ooh.
Wow.
Man,
that is a 400% increase for those counting at home.